I pretended to be unconscious when my son walked into my house with 3 strangers. I heard him say, "The old man keeps $200,000 in that safe." When they approached, I rose up and surprised them in a way that made their eyes widen in shock. My name is Gerald Fisher. I'm 73 years old, and for more than 30 years I wore the uniform of the Chicago Police Department. I was born and raised in Millfield, a small town in rural Illinois that most people have never even heard of. Today I live in a modest house on the outskirts of Chicago, where I settled after retiring from the force. I've never been much of a talker, always preferred observation. At the police department, they said I had eyes in the back of my head because nothing got past me. The life of a police officer isn't easy, especially when you have a family. How many nights did I stay awake? How many Christmases did I miss? How many of my children's birthdays was I unable to attend? All for the safety of others. I never complained. It was my duty. I made sacrifices, many sacrifices. I gave up comfort, time with family, sometimes even my own safety. And all for what? To ensure people could sleep peacefully, that families were safe, including my own family. Before I continue this story, I'd like to thank the Grandpa's Voice channel for the opportunity to share what happened. It's difficult to talk about, but maybe my experience will help someone out there. And I ask you watching, please subscribe to the channel, leave your like and comment where you're watching from and what time it is there. Every day there's a new story here from people like me who carry the weight of life on their aging shoulders. But getting back to what I was going to tell you, I never imagined that after protecting so many families, facing criminals of all kinds, I would have to protect my own home from my own son. Betrayal hurts more when it comes from inside your own house, when it comes from someone you gave your life to raise, and that's exactly what happened to me. I was born into a humble family in rural Illinois back in 1952. My father was a farmhand, working hard tending to other people's cattle, while my mother took care of the house and us. 5 children in total. Our house was simple, with a dirt floor and a roof that sometimes let the rain in, but there was never a lack of love and respect. From an early age I learned to wake up with the rooster's crow, before the sun rose, to help my father with the chores. It was in the farm work that I formed my character. I learned to respect my elders, to be honest even when no one was watching, to work hard for what was mine. At school I was an average student, but I enjoyed reading. On rainy days, when we couldn't work on the farm, I would hide under the blankets with some old book I had borrowed. That's how I discovered detective stories, police stories, and decided I wanted to serve justice too. I joined the police department at 21, full of dreams and ideals. The first years were tough. Military discipline isn't for everyone. Waking up before sunrise, going to bed after everyone else was already asleep, spending hours standing at attention in the sun or rain, patrolling the streets, dealing with all kinds of incidents, bar fights, domestic violence, armed robbery, shootouts with criminals. I've seen a bit of everything, son. And over time I moved up in my career. After a few years, I managed to join the investigation division, where my job was more about thinking than chasing criminals. My routine was unpredictable. There were days when I'd leave home at 5 a.m. and only return in the early hours of the next morning. There were times when I'd spend days away on special operations. Even so, I loved what I did. I felt I was making a difference, protecting people, building a better world for my children to grow up in. It was during an incident that I met my wife, Teresa. She was a nurse in the emergency room, where I had taken a colleague who'd been shot during an operation. While waiting for news about my partner, I observed that woman with steady hands and a gentle voice, caring for patients with a dedication that touched me deeply. After 3 months of gathering courage, I invited her for coffee. 6 months later, we were married. Our life together was simple, but happy in the early years. Teresa understood the demands of my profession, the sleepless nights, the holidays worked. She also had her hospital shifts, so we understood each other well. Soon came the children. First Marcia, then Julian. Ah, Julian. From a young age he was a smart boy with bright eyes. How proud I was of him. I worked double to give my children an education. I took odd jobs on my days off, sometimes as security at events. Other times, fixing things around the neighborhood. I was good with my hands, you know. Every penny I earned went into a savings account I opened to pay for their college. I didn't want them to go through the hardships I went through. I wanted them to have a better, more comfortable future. Over time, I managed to save a little money. I wasn't rich, but we lived with dignity. We bought a small house, but it was ours, hard-earned, every brick paid for with the sweat of my brow. Then came the car, old but well-maintained, and so we built our life. Marcia graduated in nursing, following in her mother's footsteps. Julian wanted to study business administration. He said he wanted to start his own business, be his own boss. I supported him, of course. I wanted my son to fly high. Teresa, poor thing, departed early. Aggressive cancer took my companion when we were planning our retirement. It was a hard blow. I was lost for a while, without direction. That's when I decided to retire from the police force. I had enough years of service and felt I needed to reorganize my life. I used part of my severance pay and Teresa's pension to buy a better, more comfortable house on the outskirts of Chicago. The rest I saved for emergencies. That's when things started to change. First, Julian began showing up at home with friends I didn't know, guys in expensive shirts with fast talk. They spoke quietly when I was nearby, and Julian always seemed nervous, anxious. He started asking to borrow money. First small amounts, then larger ones. He said it was to invest in his business, an import store he had opened downtown. Marcia warned me, "Dad, Julian is involved with the wrong people." I didn't want to believe it. After all, he was my son, my own blood, raised with solid values. How could he be involved in something wrong? But all the signs were there. And as an experienced police officer, I should have noticed earlier. The strange hours, money that appeared and disappeared, constant nervousness. Something was very wrong with my son, and I needed to find out what it was before it was too late. In recent months, my son Julian began to change in a way that I no longer recognized. The kid I taught to ride a bike, who swore he would be honest like his father, now had a shifty look, avoided talking to me about that business of his. I tried to ask how sales were going at the import store, and he always changed the subject. He said everything was fine, that I didn't need to worry. But a father senses when something is wrong, especially a father who spent his entire life sniffing out lies as a police officer. The signs appeared gradually. First were the strange phone calls he received and went to answer away from me, speaking softly. Then the departures in the middle of the night, when he thought I was sleeping. There were also visits from those guys in imported cars, who never entered the house, just honked outside and Julian would run out. Marcia, my daughter, began to warn me more frequently. One Sunday afternoon, she came to visit me alone, a rare thing, since she normally brought her husband and my 2 grandchildren. "Dad, I need to tell you something, but you have to promise me you won't do anything about it yet," she said, sitting on the edge of the sofa, with that worried look that reminded me so much of her mother. "Tell me, honey, what's so serious?" I asked, feeling a tightness in my chest. "It's about Julian. He owes money to dangerous people, a lot of money." It was like taking a punch to the stomach. As much as I suspected something was wrong, hearing it from my daughter's mouth was different. "How do you know this?" I asked, trying to stay calm. "Carlos, the one who used to work with him at the store, came to see me last week. He said he left the business because he discovered Julian was using the store to launder money from loan sharks. It seems he took a loan from some dangerous guys and couldn't pay it back. Now he's desperate." Money laundering, loan sharks. Words I knew well from my years in the police, words that meant serious trouble. And to think that my own son was involved in this. I felt a mixture of anger and disappointment that almost suffocated me. "Why didn't he come talk to me? I could have helped somehow," I said, more to myself than to Marcia. "Dad, he's ashamed, and I think he's afraid too. Afraid of your reaction, of disappointing you." That night I couldn't sleep. I kept tossing in bed, thinking about how to approach the subject with Julian without him shutting down even more. I decided I would wait for him to come to me, give him a chance to open up, tell the truth. But days went by and nothing. He was increasingly nervous, more absent. Sometimes he would go days without showing up at home. It was on a Wednesday night that everything changed. I was watching the news when the phone rang. It was an unknown number. "Hello?" I answered, already suspicious. "Is this Julian Fisher's house?" a deep, drawling voice asked on the other end. "Yes, who would like to speak with him?" "Tell your son that the deadline is up. Either he pays what he owes by tomorrow or we'll collect it another way." Before I could answer, the call dropped. I stood there with the phone in my hand, feeling the blood boil in my veins. So that was it. My son was being threatened and, by extension, was putting my safety at risk too. That same night, Julian came home late, around 11 p.m. I was still awake, sitting in the living room armchair, in the dark. When he came in and turned on the light, he was startled to see me there. "Dad, you scared me. What are you doing up at this hour?" he asked, trying to sound casual, but I noticed the nervousness in his voice. "I received an interesting call today," I said, without beating around the bush. "A very polite fellow warning that your deadline is up." "What deadline is that, Julian?" I saw the blood drain from his face. He tried to stammer some excuse, but I raised my hand, asking for silence. "I don't want lies, I want the truth, all of it, now." He collapsed on the sofa, put his head in his hands, and began to cry. There, at that moment, I no longer saw the 32-year-old man. I saw the boy who used to come running to show me a tooth that had fallen out or a scraped knee that needed care. "I messed everything up, Dad," he said between sobs. "The store wasn't working out. The imports were getting stuck in customs. I was losing customers." Then Mark showed up offering a loan, low interest, easy payment. It seemed like a good deal. Mark Silverman?" I asked, feeling a chill. I knew that name from my police days. He was a well-known loan shark with connections to drug trafficking. "Yeah, I think that's his last name. Do you know him?" "Unfortunately, yes. How much do you owe him?" Julian hesitated, then murmured, $200,000. I nearly fell off my chair. It was practically all my savings, all the money I'd put aside for emergencies, for perhaps someday needing medical treatment or to help my grandchildren in the future. "How did you manage to owe so much, son?" "I started with $50,000, but I couldn't pay on time and the interest kept piling up. I tried to pay a little, but every time I paid it seemed like the debt grew more. Now they're threatening to kill me, Dad, and I don't know what to do." I sat in silence for a few minutes, digesting all of this. My son's life was at risk because of a debt to loan sharks. As a police officer, I knew well how these stories usually ended. "Can you pay it?" I finally asked. "No," he answered, without looking me in the eyes. "I've already sold my car, already borrowed money from everyone I know. I don't know what else to do." It was then that he raised his eyes and looked at me in a way that made me uneasy. "Unless," he began, but stopped. "Unless what, Julian?" "Nothing, Dad, forget it, I'll figure something out." He got up, said he was going to bed, that he was tired, but I saw something in his eyes, something that put me on alert. During the night, I couldn't sleep properly. I kept going over the conversation, trying to understand what he had left unsaid. Unless... The next day, Julian left early, before breakfast. He said he was going to try to resolve the situation, asked me not to worry, as if that were possible. I spent the day restless, thinking about calling some former police colleagues, seeing if I could get some guidance, but something told me to wait, to see how Julian would handle the situation. He returned home late in the afternoon, with a strange expression. He seemed both relieved and tense. "I got a longer deadline," he told me, sitting at the kitchen table while I prepared coffee. 3 more days to raise the money." "And how are you going to get $200,000 in 3 days?" I asked suspiciously. "I have some contacts, some people who owe me favors. It'll work out, Dad." But I noticed he wasn't looking me in the eyes as he said this. And as the retired police officer that I am, I learned to recognize when someone is lying. My son was plotting something, and I needed to find out what it was before it was too late. That night, I pretended to go to bed early, but I was actually alert to his every movement around the house. Around 10 p.m. I heard him talking on the phone in an urgent whisper. "Is everything set for tomorrow?" "Yes." "He keeps the money in a safe in his bedroom. I know the combination. I saw him opening it once. $200,000. All in cash. No, he lives alone. There won't be anyone else at home. Around 3 p.m., he always takes a nap after lunch. Okay, I'll wait for you at the meeting point. I felt my blood freeze in my veins. My own son was planning to rob me, to steal the money I had gathered with so much sacrifice throughout an entire life of honest work. The same money I would have used to help him if he had asked me. But no, he preferred the easier path, the path of betrayal. At that moment, something died inside me, but at the same time, the police officer I had always been awakened. If my son wanted to rob me, I would be prepared and would teach him a lesson he would never forget. The next day, I followed the normal routine. I had breakfast, read the newspaper, had lunch at the usual time. Julian seemed nervous, constantly checking the clock. Around 2:30 p.m., I announced I was going to lie down for a bit, that I was feeling tired. "Go ahead, Dad. Rest," he said, with a solicitousness that made me sick. I went to the bedroom, but instead of lying down, I took my old service weapon that I legally kept, checking if it was loaded. I placed it under the pillow and lay down, pretending to sleep. The safe was built into the wall behind a picture in my closet. From the bed, I had a partial view of it. Now it was just a matter of waiting. It wasn't long before I heard the sound of the front door opening. Male voices, heavy footsteps down the hallway, and then my son's voice, almost unrecognizable in its coldness. "He's sleeping. Let's do this quickly." I closed my eyes, kept my breathing slow, controlled. I pretended to be in a deep sleep. I heard my bedroom door opening slowly, the soft creak of the hinges, which I purposely never oiled, precisely to serve as an alarm. "It's here," Julian whispered. "The old man keeps $200,000 in that safe." I felt footsteps approaching my bed. There were 4 people in total, my son and 3 men I didn't know. I could easily be overpowered if I didn't act quickly. I waited until they were all in the bedroom, focused on the safe, with their backs to me. It was then that I rose up in a quick movement, the gun firmly gripped, pointed at the group. "Son, you forgot I'm a retired police officer, and that this is a setup." All 4 turned in surprise. I saw terror in my son's eyes, and a mixture of fear and respect in the eyes of the other 3 men. "Dad," Julian began, but I interrupted him. "Not another word. All of you, hands up where I can see them." Slowly. The 3 men obeyed, but Julian remained paralyzed, his face a mask of shock and shame. "Do you know who I am?" I asked the 3 strangers. "Sergeant Gerald Fisher, 30 years with the Chicago Police Department, twice decorated for bravery. And you just broke into an armed police officer's house. Think carefully about what you're going to do next." One of the men, the oldest, who seemed to be the leader, stepped forward. "Look, Mr. Fisher, we didn't want to cause trouble. We just came to collect what's ours. Your son owes us." "I know exactly what my son owes," I cut in. "And I also know who you are, Mark. Or do you think I wouldn't recognize the biggest loan shark in the North Side? How many times did I bring you to the station in my patrol days?" I saw the surprise in his eyes. He hadn't expected to be recognized. "So you know this is just business, nothing personal." "It becomes personal when they invade my house. It becomes personal when my own son betrays me." I turned to Julian, who seemed to want to disappear. "Why, son? Why didn't you come talk to me? I would have helped you." I was ashamed, Dad. I didn't want you to know that I had failed, that the store went bankrupt, that I got involved with the wrong people and thought that robbing you would be better than bringing criminals into the house that I built with so much sacrifice. I saw tears in his eyes, but I wasn't moved. The betrayal was too great. "What are you going to do now, Sergeant?" Mark asked, still with his hands up. "Are you going to kill us or call your police friends?" It was a good question. What was I going to do? Calling the police would mean seeing my son arrested for attempted robbery and association with criminals. Not calling would mean letting those criminals go unpunished, perhaps to return another day. I was at a crossroads, one of the most difficult in my life. But one thing I knew. That day marked the end of my relationship with Julian as I knew it. Nothing would be the same. Trust was broken. Respect lost. I had raised my son to be a good man, and now he was there alongside criminals ready to rob me. The pain was almost physical. At that moment, I had to make a decision that would change our lives forever. "You know what's interesting, Mark?" I said. keeping the gun steady. Throughout my entire police career, I learned to recognize when someone is lying, and I also learned to always have a plan B. I turned slightly toward the corner of the room, where a small red light blinked discreetly. See that light? It's a camera. I installed it after I started to suspect something was wrong. It's recording everything since the moment you entered the house, and that's not all. I took my cell phone from my pocket with my free hand and showed them the screen. It's broadcasting live to 3 former police colleagues. One of them is Captain Rodriguez, who now works in the Property Crimes Division. He must be finding this scene very interesting. I saw panic set in the eyes of the 3 men. Julian looked like he was about to faint. "You're bluffing," said one of the accomplices, a skinny guy with a backwards cap. "Want to risk it? The police should be here in about 5 minutes, I'd say. Enough time for you 3 to get out of here and never come back. Or you can stay and explain to my former colleagues what you're doing in a retired police officer's house." Mark, the loan shark, narrowed his eyes. "And the money your son owes me? We'll resolve this another way," I replied without lowering the gun. "I have enough evidence against you to send you back to jail for a good few years. Extortion, threats, home invasion, not to mention the other charges I'm sure Captain Rodriguez would love to add to your record." I paused, letting the words sink in. "Or we can consider my son's debt settled. You never look for him again, and I forget you were here today." Mark let out a dry laugh. "You think it's that easy?" "Actually, I do," I replied, taking a small flash drive from my pocket, "because here are all the records of your loan shark operation for the last 5 years. Names, amounts, dates. A former intelligence colleague helped me get this when I discovered who my son was involved with." Mark's eyes widened. He hadn't expected that. "As I said, I always have a plan B, and I have friends in the right places." "Now, what's it going to be? Shall we resolve this like businessmen, or would you prefer to explain all this to the police?" There was a tense silence in the room. Finally, Mark nodded. "All right, Sergeant. Your son doesn't owe me anything anymore. We're even." "Great. Now all 3 of you get out of my house, and if I find out you've come looking for my son or anyone in my family again, this flash drive goes straight to the FBI." "Understood." The 3 men agreed and began to withdraw, still with their hands raised. When they reached the door, Mark turned around. "Your son was lucky to have a father like you." "No, Mark. My son was unlucky to choose the wrong path. Now he'll have to deal with the consequences." When the 3 left, I was alone in the room with Julian. He was pale, trembling, avoiding looking at me. "Dad, I don't know what to say." "Then don't say anything." I cut him off, feeling a mixture of anger and sadness consuming me from within. "You betrayed my trust in the worst possible way, brought criminals into my home. You were willing to rob me, to take the money I saved all my life through honest work. I was desperate, Dad. They were going to kill me, and you thought robbing me was the solution. Tell me something, Julian. If I had woken up during the robbery, what would you have done? Would you have hurt me, killed me?" He didn't answer, and his silence was answer enough. "Take your things and get out of my house," I said, feeling each word like a knife in my own chest. "You are no longer welcome here." "Dad, please give me a chance to explain." "Explain what?" "That you preferred to associate with criminals rather than ask your father for help. That you were willing to rob me instead of facing the consequences of your mistakes." "There's nothing to explain, Julian. Everything is very clear to me." I saw tears streaming down my son's face, the same face I had kissed as a baby, that I had consoled when he fell and hurt his knees, that I had seen smile on graduation day. But now all I could see was the betrayal. "Where will I go?" he asked, suddenly seeming very young and lost. "That's no longer my problem. You're a man now, Julian, a man who made wrong choices and now needs to face the consequences." He left the room with his head down, and I sat on the bed, feeling the weight of my 73 years more than ever. The gun was still in my hand, now as heavy as lead. Tears that I didn't know I was holding back began to fall. An hour later, I heard the front door closing. Julian had left, taking only a backpack with some clothes. I sat there alone, wondering where I had gone wrong in raising my son. The phone rang, snapping me out of my stupor. It was Marcia. "Dad, is everything okay?" "Julian just called me crying, said you kicked him out of the house." "Everything's fine, honey. I replied, trying to keep my voice steady. Your brother and I had a disagreement, that's all. What kind of disagreement makes you kick your son out of the house, Dad? I told her what had happened. The silence on the other end of the line was deafening. My God, Dad, I can't believe Julian did that. And what's going to happen now? I don't know, honey. I just know I can't trust him anymore. And a house without trust isn't a home. After the call, I wandered around the empty house, feeling a void in my chest that nothing seemed to fill. My son's betrayal had opened a wound that I didn't know if would ever heal. In the days that followed, I received several calls from Julian. I didn't answer any of them. Marcia came to visit me more frequently, worried about me. She told me that her brother was staying at her house trying to reorganize his life. He's sorry, Dad, really sorry. Remorse doesn't erase what he did, honey. Some betrayals are unforgivable. A week later, I received a call from Captain Rodriguez, my friend from my police days. Gerald, that son of yours, Julian, came to the station today. He came to file a complaint against Mark, the loan shark. Said he was a victim of extortion, that he was threatened, that he almost did something stupid because of it. I remained silent, absorbing the information. You know what else he did? He brought a flash drive with all of Mark's operations, names, dates, amounts. He said he got it from you. Is that true? I lied, I replied, surprised. I didn't have any flash drive. It was just an empty drive I carried in my pocket. I heard my friend's laughter on the other end. Well, your son seems to have actually gotten that information. I don't know how, but he did. And thanks to that, we just arrested Mark and his entire gang. Your son did a great service to society, Gerald. I hung up the phone thoughtfully. How had Julian gotten that information, and why had he done that? The answer came the next morning when he appeared at my door. He looked haggard with deep, dark circles, but there was something different in his look. A determination I hadn't seen in a long time. Dad, I know you don't want to see me, but I need to explain something. Please, just 5 minutes. Reluctantly, I let him in. We sat in the living room, facing each other, like two strangers. How did you get the information about Mark? I asked directly. I worked for him, Julian replied, looking at his own hands. After the store went bankrupt, he offered me a job in his operation. I was desperate. I accepted. It was just to organize the records, nothing illegal, he said. I shook my head disappointedly. But I soon saw what I had gotten myself into, he continued. I saw how he treated people who owed him, how he destroyed entire families. So I took out a loan from him, pretending I needed the money. Why? To get access to the records, to understand how his scheme worked. And while I worked there, I kept copying everything, gathering evidence. For what, Julian? Were you planning to report him? Not initially, he admitted. At first it was just insurance in case he came after me. But then, after what happened here, after seeing the disappointment in your eyes, Dad, I realized how lost I had become and decided to do the right thing for the first time in a long time. I remained silent, digesting his words. I was never really going to rob you, Dad, he said with a choked voice. That was a plan to lure Mark into a trap. I knew you would notice what was happening. I knew your police habits. I knew you would be prepared. You risked a lot, Julian. What if I hadn't noticed? What if the plan had gone wrong? I had a plan B too, he smiled sadly. I learned from the best. I couldn't help a small smile. My son had planned all of that, had risked his own life to catch Mark. Why didn't you tell me? I asked. Because you would never have believed me. You needed to see my genuine reaction. And I deserved your anger, Dad. I deserved to be kicked out. I lost my way. I made terrible choices. I needed that shock to wake up. We sat in silence for a few minutes. Part of me wanted to believe him, wanted to hug him and tell him everything would be all right. Another part still felt betrayed, hurt. Rodriguez told me that you did a great service to society, that thanks to you, Mark and his entire gang were arrested. It wasn't because of me, Dad. It was because of you. You taught me right from wrong. I just took a while to remember. At that moment, I saw in his eyes the boy I had raised, the boy who admired his police officer father, who wanted to make a difference in the world. Can you forgive me, Dad? He asked with tears in his eyes. I didn't answer immediately. Some wounds take time to heal. I don't know, son, I need time, but I'm proud of what you did, of facing your wrong choices and trying to fix things. It wasn't complete forgiveness, but it was a start. And for the first time in weeks, I felt a small hope that perhaps with time our relationship could be rebuilt. 3 months have passed since that day when I confronted my own son and 3 criminals in my bedroom. 3 months of reconstruction, of slowly healing wounds, of difficult conversations and cautious reunions. Life has a way of surprising us, doesn't it? When you think you've seen it all, that nothing else can surprise you, comes one of those turns that shake you to the bone. The case of Mark, the loan shark, made headlines in the local papers. Ex-cop and son dismantle loan shark network that had operated for more than a decade, said the front page. Of course, the story that came out in the papers didn't tell everything, didn't talk about the betrayal, the sleepless nights, the tears shed, but it talked about courage, justice, about how a father and son working together managed to bring down a gang that destroyed families. Sitting on the porch of my house with a hot cup of coffee in my hands, watching the sun set behind the trees, I found myself reflecting on everything that happened, how life is full of twists, how the people we love most can hurt us deeply, and how sometimes in the midst of pain comes a chance for redemption. Julian didn't come back to live with me. Maybe it's better that way. He rented a small apartment near his sister's house and is rebuilding his life little by little. He got a job at a security company. Ironic, isn't it? The policeman's son following somewhat in his father's footsteps. We see each other every week now, usually on Sundays when he comes for lunch. Conversations are still a bit tense sometimes, but we're learning to know each other again, to build a new relationship based on respect and honesty. "You were right, Dad," he told me at one of those lunches. "There's no shortcut to happiness. We have to build the path with honest work, day by day." I heard that and felt a lump in my throat, because in the end, isn't that what we all want? For our children to learn the lessons that life taught us, not to make the same mistakes we made. Marcia says, I should completely forgive Julian, leave everything in the past. "He made a mistake, Dad, but who doesn't?" she tells me with that sweet manner she inherited from her mother. And she's right, I know. Forgiveness is a two-way street. I needed to forgive my son, but also forgive myself for not noticing the signs earlier, for not being more present. What happened changed our family forever. Julian is no longer the same. I am no longer the same. But maybe that's not necessarily a bad thing. Trials force us to grow, to reassess what's really important. One thing I realized in these months is how loneliness can lead us down strange paths. After Teresa passed, I closed off a bit. I stayed more at home, talked less with neighbors, rarely visited friends, and Julian, even living with me, was also alone in a way. Perhaps we drifted apart without realizing it, each living in our own solitude under the same roof. But now I'm changing that. I went back to frequenting the Police Retirees Club, where I meet old colleagues for card games and good conversations. I'm more present in my grandchildren's lives, Peter and Annie, Marcia's children. I take them fishing on weekends. I tell stories from my police days, the versions appropriate for children, of course. And the most surprising, I met a lady, Irene, a widow like me, who frequents the same club. We started talking about books. She was a literature teacher, and now we have weekly meetings at the cafe near the park. It's not a romance, not at my age, but it's a pleasant company, someone with whom I can share thoughts, memories, laughter. Marcia says I'm more jovial, less grumpy. Must be true. One afternoon I received an unexpected visit. It was Captain Rodriguez, my old police colleague. "You know Gerald," he told me, sitting in my living room with a strong cup of coffee in his hands. "We need someone with experience to give lectures to the rookies, someone who can tell them what police work was like back in the day, share accumulated wisdom. I thought of you." At first I hesitated. Who would want to listen to an old retired cop talking about the good old days? But Rodriguez insisted, and I ended up accepting. Now twice a month I go to the police academy to tell my stories, share learnings, answer questions from young people who are starting the career to which I dedicated my life. It's gratifying to see the respect in their eyes, to realize that my words have an impact, that my experiences can help form better, more humane police officers. And it's in these moments that I feel my life had a purpose, that everything I went through was worth it. I never imagined that at 73 years old I would be starting a new chapter in my life. Never thought that my son's betrayal could, in some strange way, bring us closer. But life is like that, full of surprises, of second chances. Last Sunday, Julian brought me a gift, a carved wooden box made by himself. Inside was an old watch, a pocket watch. "It was Grandpa's," he explained. "I found it in Mum's things after she passed. I had it restored for you." I took the watch in my hands, feeling the weight of family history there. My father used to wear that watch when I was a boy. I remembered him checking the time in the field, the strong sun above us as we worked with the cattle. "Thank you, son." It was all I could say, emotion tightening my throat. "I thought it was time for it to return to you," he replied with a small smile. "To remind you that time passes, but some things remain." At that moment, I felt that we were finally reconnecting, not like before, it would never be like before, but in a new way, perhaps even deeper. Trust is still being rebuilt, brick by brick, day by day, but we're on the right path. The Mark case had interesting developments. With his arrest and the dismantling of the gang, many people who were indebted, trapped in that vicious cycle of loan sharking, could breathe a sigh of relief. Some even sought us out to thank us. An old bakery owner came to my door with tears in his eyes and a basket of fresh bread. "You don't know me," he said, "but your son and you saved my business, my family. I saw no way out." I heard similar stories from several people, and that's when Julian had the idea to create a support group for small business owners in difficulty, a place where they could receive financial guidance, psychological support, and in some cases, even small loans at fair interest rates through a partnership with a credit union. "I want to use what I learned to help, Dad," he explained to me. "I want to transform that bad experience into something positive." Seeing my son using his own pain to help others filled me with a pride I hadn't felt in a long time. He was finding his way, his redemption. And that made me think about how life's greatest lessons usually come from our biggest mistakes. One of those afternoons, we were sitting on the porch, Julian and I, watching the light rain falling on the garden. A comfortable silence hung between us, the kind that only exists between people who have faced the worst together and survived to tell the story. "Dad," he broke the silence, "have you really forgiven me?" I looked at him, at the face I had known since the first cry in the maternity ward, at the eyes that were so similar to my own. "You know, son, forgiveness isn't something that happens all at once," I replied, choosing my words carefully. "It's a process. There are days when I wake up and feel I've completely forgiven. There are others when the hurt still aches a little, but I'm getting there. We're getting there together." He nodded, understanding. "The important thing," I continued, "is that I never stopped loving you, even in the most difficult moments, even when I thought I had lost you forever. A father's love doesn't end, son. It can get hurt, wounded, but it doesn't end." I saw tears in his eyes and felt my own as well. We didn't hug, we weren't at that point yet, but our hands met over the table in a firm grip that said more than words. If there's one lesson I learned from all this, it's that it's never too late to start over, never too late to forgive, to be forgiven, to find a new path. Life keeps knocking us down, testing us, breaking us sometimes, but it's in the breakage that light enters, as they say. It's in the scars we carry the proof that we survived. The other day, talking to the class of cadets at the academy, a young man asked me what was the most difficult moment of my career. They expected a story of a shootout, a chase, a confrontation with criminals, but I replied that the most difficult moment was when I had to point a gun at my own son. Because being a police officer is easy, I explained to them. The difficult part is being human. It's doing the right thing even when it hurts, even when it breaks your heart. It's maintaining your values even when everything around you seems to be falling apart. I saw in the eyes of those young people that the message had been understood, and I thought to myself that perhaps this is my true legacy. Not the money in the safe, not the house, not the material possessions, but the lessons, the values, the integrity that I tried to pass on to my children and that I can now share with these young people who are beginning their journeys. Life has taught me that there are no pure villains and heroes. We all have light and shadow within us. We can all fall. We can all rise. My son fell but found the strength to get back up. I also fell in my own way, closing myself off in my world, neglecting the signs that something was wrong. And we are both rising day by day. If you've made it this far, I thank you from the bottom of my heart. It's not easy to listen to the ramblings of an old retired police officer. Subscribe to the channel and leave your like. And if you really followed me to the end of this journey, comment below the word redemption. Only those who watched will understand the meaning. I thank the Grandpa's Voice channel for this opportunity to share my story, and perhaps, who knows, help someone who is going through something similar. Because in the end, that's what life is made of: falls and rises, mistakes and learnings, forgiveness given and received. A tight hug from this old man, who learned that it's never too late to rebuild what was broken.